as we mentioned earlier, doing stories and stuff. Maybe there's a trapper that lived here and he went down to the river one day to check his beaver trap and maybe he fell in.
Maybe there's a trapper that lived here and he went down to the river one day to check his beaver trap and maybe he fell in.
Who knows? Now we could do a cabinectomy. In other words, just cut it off. Get it the way we want it. Better have a door in our cabin. It's easier to get in and out if you got a door. It's hard climbing through the window sometimes.
It's hard climbing through the window sometimes.
Welcome, and all American Cartel members, Anons, Facebook friends, Twitter followers, random YouTube viewer, BitChute viewer, TikToker, Redditor, GLPer, 4chaner, Rumbler, and anybody else that might be watching. Thanks for joining me. My name is Julio. I am the Theorizing Theorist. And today we're going to cover Bob Ross being a serial killer, and we're going to start with his Wikipedia. Now, I got some very compelling evidence, and I have names of victims for y'all, but we'll get there in due time. Now, this part may seem a little bit tedious or boring to some of y'all, but it's very important you know some certain facts about Robert Norman Ross. Was an American painter, art instructor, and television host. He was a creator and host of The Joy of Painting, which is, well, anyway, let me just read this through. It's a long video here. An instructional television program that aired from 1983 to 1994 on PBS in the United States, CBC in Canada, and similar channels in Latin America, Europe, and elsewhere. Ross would subsequently become widely known through his posthumous internet presence. Now, I'm curious as to how many of y'all knew that he was in the military. He was actually in it for 20 years, from 1961 to 1981. Now, 1981 is a very important date. Please remember it. He even got to the rank of Master Sergeant. So 1981, write it down in your notes if you need to. Early life. Ross was born in Daytona Beach, Florida to Jack and Ollie Ross, a carpenter and waitress respectively, and raised in Orlando, Florida. As an adolescent, Ross cared for injured animals, including armadillos, snakes, alligators, and squirrels, one of which was later featured in several episodes of his television show. He had a half-brother, Jim, who he mentioned in passing on his show. Ross dropped out of high school in the 9th grade while working as a carpenter with his father. He lost part of his left index finger, which did not affect his ability to later hold a palette while painting. In 1961, 18-year-old Ross enlisted in the United States Air Force and was put into service as a medical records technician. He rose to the rank of Master Sergeant and served as the first sergeant of the clinic at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska. That's very important, where he first saw the snow and mountains that later appear as recurring themes in his paintings. He is very important. That's very important as well, guys. He developed his quick painting technique during brief daily work breaks, having held military positions that required him to act tough and mean. The guy who makes you scrub the latrine, the guy who makes you make your bed, the guy who screams at you for being late to work. Ross decided he would not raise his voice when he left the military. Now let's jump ahead a little bit. The landscapes he painted, typically mountains, lakes, snows, and log cabin scenes, were inspired by his years in Alaska, where he was stationed for the majority of his Air Force career. He repeatedly said everyone has inherent artistic talent and could become an accomplished artist given time, practice, and encouragement. Ross would say, "We don't make mistakes, we just have happy accidents." In 2014, the blog 538, this is important too, analyzed 381 episodes in which Ross painted live, concluding that 91% of Ross's painting contained at least one tree, 44 contained clouds, 39 mountains, 34 mountain lakes, and by his own estimation, Ross completed more than 30,000 paintings, 3 of each one basically. His work rarely contained human subjects or signs of human life. I think once it did, and then on rare occasions he would incorporate a cabin, sometimes with a chimney but without smoke and possibly unoccupied. So I think the cabin is the signal that they have, that he's using to kind of mark which paintings has a body attached to it, if that makes any sense. So go and check to see if you can find any paintings and maybe shoot me a link to where you found it and I can check it out. Maybe I can link it to another murder. But anyway, together with husband, now check this out, this is how he's affiliated with the CIA. Together with husband Walt, a retired CIA operative, Kowalski decided to make Ross the face of a new hobby craft business, a cottage industry of sorts, in the late 1970s and early 80s. So he's affiliated with the CIA, and I want you guys to know that the Bob Ross show, for whatever reasons, it's a phenomenon, if you will, that while it was airing, they had measured the amounts of crimes that would happen. And I want you to see here that he was a traveling salesman, as you can see there under the August 27, 2021. Very important as well. But yeah, the Bob Ross show would increase the amount of violence that would happen out in the public during its time of airing. So whatever that means. Now let's get to the bodies. Porcupine River. Now I want you to see the location of the mouth of Porcupine River. It's right on top of damn near of this Air Force base. Now, what's so specific or significant about this Porcupine River? Well, the painting with the cabin kind of looks like it. I'm not trying to sit here and say, I'm sure at any angle you can make anything fit, but a man vanished on Alaska trapping expedition 46 years ago. His skull was just ID'd. Now, it wasn't just any trapping expedition. It was a beaver trapping expedition. And if you recall what he said in the beginning, right? And if you could only imagine my surprise or lack thereof when I discovered that they found only his skull next to a river. So anyway, snow-covered hills in the Porcupine. Oh, let's read this. His family members remember Gary Frank Southern as a free spirit who spent time in Canada and worked on the Alaska oil pipeline. When he set out on the trip of a lifetime to go trapping in the Alaskan wilderness in fall of 1976, his family understood Sister Ann Bunyan told KTUU. Now, but the 25-year-old from New York vanished sometime over the winter. His family never heard from him again. Now, lots of weird discrepancies going on here in this story. They say a bear got to him because they found markings on his skull, and they even went to say that there were puncture markings that were perfectly, distanced and show that it was a bear. And then you hear other articles, and you're going to read in this article even, it says that his head was just clawed at, scratched. Whatever that means. I guess you could scratch somebody with your teeth. Now, 46 years later, DNA testing on a skull found by a hunter in 1997 has identified Southerner's remains. Now, I want you to know that what's his name died in 95, so less than a year and a half later or 2 years later they found the body of this guy. His family always suspected that was the case. Bunyan told KTUU they couldn't imagine Southerner, who'd now be 71, would leave them wondering all these years. Confirmation, though, has brought acceptance. That's the life he chose, Bunyan told the station, and not that he chose his death, but he chose a life where that was a possibility. So we just have to allow him to have chosen what he wanted. Now, I don't agree with that being what he was choosing with that possibility. He was just trying to take a trip, a fateful trip, if that. Southerner set out with another man to trap along with the Porcupine River north of the Arctic Circle in fall of 1976. His friend suggested they work together on the same side of the river, but Steve Southern told the Post-Standard that his brother had other ideas. Now, the friend's named Stan, and they don't know any other information about him. This says the family, at least, and I don't know any. So anyway, he was very independent and loved the outdoors, and he liked to do things the way he wanted to do things. Steve told the publication instead the friends agreed to trap on opposite sides of the river, then meet up in the spring to catch a plane out. Now, the guy, Stan, got sick early and took off early, and he just assumed that the dude would have figured it out and leave on his own. But when the time to return home arrived, Gary never showed up, KTUU reported. His family hired a friend to search for him, but the man found only his camp with some of his supplies. I wonder what his camp was. Was it a tent? Was it a shack? Was it a shed? Maybe the shed is just a gravestone, if you will. In time, his family erected a gravestone listing Gary's date of death as 1977 with an inscription reading "Lost in Alaska," the station said.